Hey everyone, and welcome back. Ready to delve into one of America's most infamous unsolved cases?
Yeah, absolutely.
We're talking about the Zodiac Killer.
A case that's fascinated and terrified people for decades.
You might think you know the story from the movies or documentaries, but we're going deeper. We're looking at police reports, original ciphers, and witness statements.
We're going to try to separate fact from fiction.
Exactly. And we'll explore why this case still haunts us today.
It's a story of a killer who was also a master manipulator, taunting the police and the public with his coded messages.
So let's rewind back to the late 1960s in Northern California, a time of peace, love, and the hippie movement. But there's another side to that era.
Right, a darker side. This is also a time of intense social and political upheaval. The Vietnam War, civil rights protests, and a lot of uncertainty. And it's from this backdrop that the Zodiac emerged.
And shattered that sense of peace. December 20th, 1968 marks a turning point.
Two teenagers, Betty Lou Jensen and David Faraday, were on their first date, parked at a lover's lane near Vallejo.
It was a pretty isolated spot, right?
Yeah. Sadly, that night, they became the Zodiac's first victims, shot to death in their car.
Just a brutal and senseless act of violence.
It sent shockwaves through the community.
People must have been terrified.
Absolutely. And the randomness of it all amplified that fear.
Because it could have been anyone.
Exactly. And just a few months later, on July 4th, 1969, the Zodiac struck again. Darlene Ferrin and Michael McGough were attacked in a similar fashion.
This time, though, there was a survivor.
Right. Michael McGough survived the attack and was able to provide a description of the assailant to the police.
So finally, there's a potential lead, a face to the name.
Yes. And this led to the creation of a composite sketch, one of the key pieces of evidence we have to this day.
But still, the Zodiac remained elusive.
And on September 27, 1969, he attacked again. Cecilia Shepard and Brian Hartnell were targeted at Lake Berryessa.
Now, this attack was different, right? It was more brazen.
Much more. This time, the Zodiac wore a hooded costume with his signature symbol on it. He tied up his victims and left a message on their car door, a chilling calling card.
Almost like he wanted to make a statement, to be recognized.
Exactly. He was becoming a figure of terror, a real-life boogeyman.
And with each attack, the public's fear and fascination grew.
You have to remember, this was before 247 News and the internet. The Zodiac's crimes were dominating newspapers and TV.
He was controlling the narrative.
Completely.
And then the letters started coming.
The first confirmed letter arrived on July 31st, 1969, containing a cipher that, when cracked, revealed his twisted pleasure in the murders.
It was a taunt, a confession, and a threat all in one.
And it marked a new chapter in the case.
Yeah.
One that would involve the public in a dangerous game.
Trying to decipher his codes, understand his motives.
Yeah, the public became almost obsessed with trying to solve the puzzle of the Zodiac.
Especially the 340-character cipher, which remained unsolved for decades.
Until December 2020.
When a team of amateur code breakers finally cracked it.
The message was chilling. I hope you are having lots of fun in trying to catch me.
It also included this odd pop culture reference. That wasn't me on the TV show.
It's believed to be a reference to the Jim Dunbar Show, a local talk show that had featured the case.
Adding another layer to the mystery. Was he seeking attention? Mocking the investigation?
Or was there a deeper, darker meaning? It's one of the many questions that continue to haunt us.
Was it ego? A lust for notoriety? Or something more sinister? What do you think?
Well, the Zodiac's motives remain one of the central mysteries of the case. Some believe he craved recognition, others that he was driven by a need for power and control. But without a definitive answer, we can only speculate.
And to add to the complexity, the investigation faced some significant roadblocks.
Absolutely. You had multiple jurisdictions involved, the media frenzy, and the limitations of forensic science at the time.
So much to unpack there. You had murders spanning different counties, each with its own procedures and priorities.
And the media, while keeping the case in the public eye, also contributed to a lot of misinformation and speculation.
Making things even more difficult for investigators.
Right. It was a chaotic time. And you have to remember, this was long before DNA profiling and the advanced forensic techniques we have today.
Fingerprinting was the primary tool, but it wasn't as sophisticated as it is now.
They were working with limited resources and outdated technology, trying to solve a complex puzzle with only half the pieces.
And the Zodiac knew this. He exploited those limitations.
Absolutely. He played a game where the rules were constantly changing, leaving investigators scrambling to keep up.
So it sounds like investigators were facing an uphill battle right from the start.
Yeah, Definitely. You've got a cunning killer, seemingly one step ahead, outdated technology, and a media frenzy that wasn't always helping matters.
It must have felt like chasing a ghost. But they did have some leads, right? Some potential suspects.
Yeah, over the years, there have been hundreds of leads and potential suspects.
But none panned out.
Exactly. None could be definitively linked to the crimes.
One of the most well-known figures in the case, though, is Arthur Lee Allen.
Right. Arthur Lee Allen. He was a convicted child molester.
And he had a history of violence, too, right?
Yeah.
He owned a Zodiac watch, and there were even witness accounts placing him near some of the crime scenes.
Yeah.
So what made him such a strong suspect?
Well, Allen had several things going against him. For one, he lived in the Vallejo area.
Where the first attacks took place.
Right. And some witnesses placed him near the crime scenes, and he had a disturbing interest in weapons and explosives.
But ultimately, it wasn't enough to charge him.
No, the evidence was mostly circumstantial.
He died in 1992 without ever being charged with the Zodiac crimes.
And he took his secrets, if he had any, to the grave.
So a dead end? Or did the investigation continue?
Oh, it definitely didn't stop there. The cases continued to attract attention from both professional and amateur investigators.
Even though Allen was a prime suspect, his death didn't really close the case.
No, it didn't. It just added another layer to the mystery.
I imagine it also fueled even more speculation, right?
Absolutely. Over the years, there have been countless theories about who the Zodiac was.
I've heard some pretty wild ones. Disgruntled ex-lovers, secret society members, even a theory connecting the Zodiac to the Unabomber.
Right. It's a case that really captures the imagination, and it's easy to get caught up in the speculation.
So the mystery continues. But beyond the fear and the intrigue, is there something else we can take away from this case?
I think so. The Zodiac case really forces us to confront some uncomfortable truths about ourselves, about our desire for order, and the fact that sometimes evil goes unpunished.
Yeah, it definitely challenges our faith in the justice system. The idea that every crime can be solved, that there's always a resolution.
Exactly. The Zodiac case reminds us that there are limits to what we can know and understand, and that some mysteries may remain unsolved forever.
Speaking of unsolved mysteries, let's talk about some recent developments in the case. In 2021, a team of independent investigators, they called themselves the Case Breakers.
Right.
They claimed to have finally identified the Zodiac.
Yeah, their announcement was huge news.
They said it was a man named Gary Francis Post who had actually died in 2018.
Right.
It felt like maybe finally, after all these years, we were getting some answers.
The Case Breakers presented a lot of what seemed like compelling evidence, including new forensic analysis and even photo comparisons that they claimed linked Post to the crimes.
They even said they deciphered a hidden message in one of the Zodiac ciphers revealing Post's name. It seems like a pretty big breakthrough. So was this the end of the mystery?
Well, not quite. While the Case Breakers' findings definitely made headlines, law enforcement hasn't officially confirmed them.
Really?
Yeah. The FBI and the San Francisco Police Department still consider the case open. They maintain that the evidence is inconclusive.
So, more questions than answers. Where does this leave us? Is there still hope for a definitive resolution?
I'd say there's always hope, but it's a complex case.
Yeah.
There's a lot of misinformation out there, and the fact that it's been so long makes things even harder. Witnesses are gone, memories have faded.
And evidence might be contaminated or lost. It makes sense. But on the other hand, we do have amazing advances in technology now, things that weren't available back then.
Oh, absolutely.
DNA technology has come a long way, especially with genetic genealogy. It's been really helpful in cracking other cold cases.
Yeah, genetic genealogy has been a game changer. It uses DNA databases to track down familial relationships. So by comparing crime scene DNA to these databases, investigators can identify potential relatives of a suspect, even if the suspect themselves isn't in the database.
So there's potential there.
Definitely.
But it's not a guaranteed solution, right?
Right. I mean, the Zodiac case is, well, it's incredibly complex. There's so much we still don't know.
Like his true motives.
Exactly.
And even if we never definitively identify him, are there things we can still learn from this case? I mean, besides the obvious advances in forensic technology.
Oh, for sure. I think one of the biggest takeaways from the Zodiac case is the importance of communication and collaboration between different law enforcement agencies.
Because back then, there were a lot of jurisdictional issues that hindered the investigation, right? Different departments weren't sharing information as effectively as they could have.
Exactly. And the Zodiac case really highlighted that need for better communication and coordination.
So that a case like this doesn't fall through the cracks.
Exactly. I mean, today we have task forces, joint investigations, and databases that allow for much faster and more efficient information sharing.
So that's a positive change that came out of this tragedy.
Absolutely.
What else? Are there any other lessons we can take away?
Well, I think the Zodiac case also shows the importance of forensic science, but also its limitations.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, DNA technology has revolutionized how we investigate crimes.
But it's not a magic bullet.
Right. We can't rely solely on technology to solve every case. Good old-fashioned detective work is still essential. Talking to witnesses, analyzing evidence, connecting the dots.
So a combination of both is key.
Exactly. And lastly, I think the Zodiac case serves as a really chilling reminder of the capacity for darkness that exists within humanity.
Yeah, it forces us to confront the fact that there are people out there who are capable of doing terrible things, people who operate outside the boundaries of morality and empathy.
Right.
It's a sobering thought, but it also highlights the resilience of the human spirit,
Absolutely.
the desire to seek justice, to find answers, and that's something worth remembering too. You know, it's interesting we talk about this case and all its darkness and tragedy, and yet it's also strangely captivating.
Yeah.
What do you think it is about the Zodiac that still holds this grip on our imagination after all these years?
Well, I think it's a combination of things. The fact that it's unsolved, the mystery of it all.
People love a good puzzle.
Exactly. And the Zodiac, with his cryptic messages, the costume, the ciphers, he's become this almost mythical figure.
Like a real-life boogeyman.
Yeah, almost like a character from a horror movie.
Yeah.
And because he was never caught, that fear, that sense of unease, it lingers.
He tapped into something primal, didn't he? That fear of the unknown, the random, the idea that danger could be lurking anywhere. And the media at the time definitely played a role.
Oh, absolutely. Newspapers, television, they were all over this case, fueling the public's anxiety, the speculation.
It's amazing to think how different it was back then. No internet, no social media. The way we consume true crime today is completely different.
Right.
Do you think the Zodiac would have thrived in today's digital landscape?
It's a tough question.
It's like a double-edged sword, right?
Exactly. On one hand, we have so much more technology now. Surveillance, DNA analysis, online investigative tools. It would be much harder to operate the way he did back then.
To stay hidden.
Right. But on the other hand, you have the anonymity of the internet, the echo chambers of social media, the ability to manipulate information so easily.
Imagine the Zodiac using social media to taunt the police, to spread misinformation.
It's a chilling thought.
It's like this case forces us to think about these bigger questions too. Security versus privacy, freedom of information, protecting vulnerable people online.
It's complex, and there are no easy answers.
And it all circles back to this one unsolved mystery, the Zodiac case. It raises questions about our justice system, our relationship with the media, and the nature of evil itself.
And through all of that, it's important to remember the victims, the real people whose lives were tragically cut short.
Right. Behind all the headlines, the theories, the ciphers, there are real people who were impacted by this.
Betty Lou Jensen, David Faraday, Darlene Ferrin, Cecilia Shepard, Paul Stein, their stories deserve to be remembered.
Their lives were stolen. And even though the search for the Zodiac might continue, we can't ever lose sight of that, the human cost.
You know, true crime, it's not just entertainment. It's a reflection of real-world violence, real-world consequences.
And a reminder that behind every case file, there are families, loved ones who are forever changed by these tragedies.
It's important to approach these stories with sensitivity and empathy.
So as we reach the end of our deep dive, we're still left with a lot of unanswered questions. Will the Zodiac ever be definitively identified? Will we ever understand his motives?
It's hard to say.
We might never have all the answers.
But we can still learn from this case. Use it to examine our own society, our fears, our fascination with the macabre.
The Zodiac may have vanished, but the questions he raised remain. A haunting reminder of the enduring power of the unknown.
And the limits of our understanding.
And to everyone listening, as you continue to think about the Zodiac Killer, remember the victims, question the narratives, and never stop searching for the truth. Thanks for joining us on The Deep Dive.